For this video, we traveled back to Waldowview Farm with owner and shepherd Tom Hodgman. This video should not be used to substitute veterinary advice. Always consult a veterinarian for medical guidance. So now we're going to go over basic veterinary care for lambing. And a veterinary kit or a lambing kit is something that will evolve over time. We're just going to go over some very basic things that you might want to have on hand. But first, I do want to say that it is extremely important to have a current veterinary client-patient relationship. So you want to have a vet who you can call when things go awry, or just get general advice. Because generally veterinarians won't come to your farm unless you have already established a relationship. There are some exceptions, but it is always encouraged to have a vet relationship. So Tom, if you want to go ahead and point out some of the basic things that you have on hand and how we handle lambs when they hit the ground.
Sure. I think the first thing to talk about is some options for weighing lambs. Getting a birth weight and a weaning weight are two key ways to assess growth of your lambs and how well you're doing as a shepherd in terms of feeding and producing lambs for market. So we just use a basic fish scale that you can get at any not hardware store, but a sporting goods store. And then here's a couple of options for holding the lamb. Years ago, we did this by holding the lamb and standing on a bathroom scale and subtracting your weight. But nowadays, we've come up in the world. This is an actual sling for putting the lamb in. So it's got a little Velcro piece across the front. And you can see it's been heavily used, but we've kind of retired it now. Lamb goes in this, and then we hang that off the scale. The tried and true method is a cloth grocery bag or other sort of tote bag. Just drop the lamb inside and hang it. That's pretty good. And then there's a newfangled way is what they call a lamb rake, where you can literally reach down, pick up the lamb, and then hang it off the scale, all ready to go, and then get the weight of them. The advantage to the lamb rake is you don't have any scent left on the lamb from other lambs or from yourself. Whereas with a cloth bag, these can get quite soiled over time. You have to wash them fairly regularly to keep a lot of birthing fluids off of them. So, but that's our options for weighing. So let's take a second and look in our lambing kit. We don't have a lot of things in our kit, but we do have some pretty basic things. We have some iodine. This is triiodine 7. Is what's available now. That's used for dipping navels. There's a risk of navel ill, which is a joint ailment if you don't sterilize the navel shortly after birth. We have a bottle of lube. You never know when you're going to need that. This has chlorhexidine in it, so it's a mild antiseptic as well. We use, in the wintertime, we'll use sort of a vitamin E supplement, which you can get commercially. This is good to get the lamb off to a good start. There's a high fat content in there. We also have a thermometer, just a rectal thermometer digital, which always good to know what the lamb's body temperature is in case we suspect they are hypothermic. And then we use a little, we record everything in a small data book, and the book has information on the dam's ID number, the sire's number, the date of the birth weight of the lamb, the sex, the birth type, that sort of thing. We also keep track of if it's received its first vaccination or its second vaccination, weaning weight as well. So a good little lambing book is handy. I love these. I've done a lot of different ones, data sheets on clipboards. They get covered with iodine. And then iodine eats paper, so you lose your data sheets. But this fits right in the shirt pocket, and it pretty much lives in my shirt pocket for the entire lambing season. So occasionally you do have to assist you with delivering her lambs for any number of reasons, and it's best to have some tools on hand to do that. The simplest thing sometimes is just sorting out which lamb is which. If you have multiple lambs coming at one time, you might get 3 or 4 legs presenting, and you don't really know which leg belongs to which. So sometimes just a simple piece of butcher's twine with a little loop on the end around the leg, you can tell that that's belongs to this one, and then you can tie a knot in the end or 2 knots in the end to determine this one belongs to another one. So that can help you sort things out. And sometimes you have to push a lamb back in and then right things and then bring them back out. And if you do, you can lose those feet. And then once you've sorted them out, it's just handy to have a way to mark the legs. And we use a simple piece of butcher's twine if we do that. Pullers, there's a couple of different types of pullers here. These are pretty simple to use. They would just go around the front leg of the animal, and you would just be able to pull that out. So you could put 2 on the front leg, and then you could pull with one hand and guide the head, get the head through the pelvis, that sort of thing. Here's this one's made of rubber, so it's pretty flexible. I've used this one a few times. This one here is brand new. I've never actually used it, but it's quite nice. You can boil this afterwards and get it nice and clean. This thing gets soaked in betadine, scrub with betadine after every season, actually after every pull. And we don't pull very much, but we do pull occasionally. I haven't used this for a couple of years, but this is the mother of all pullers, and it really does work. This thing is incredibly useful. This goes behind the head, and the ears would be like that, and you pull out, and when you get this thing on, the lamb will come out. I've had some very, very difficult pulls that was taking me 10, 20, 30 minutes. This thing will get them in a matter of minutes. So it's better for the ewe, it's better for the lamb to just to do it. These are commercially available at any of the sheep supply outlets. This one is several years old. Like I said, I haven't used it in a few years, but I remember the last time I did use it, and I struggled. I came over here, washed this thing up with betadine, got it all nice and clean, went over there, and I had the lamb out in a couple of minutes. So well worth the investment on that type of puller.
So on the topic of pulling a lamb out, so for someone who has never gone through a lambing season before, are there nuances to this? And, when is it time to call a veterinarian?
Right. The thing is to monitor if things are progressing. When things stop progressing, that's when to intervene. A lamb should be out within, the first lamb should be out within 30 minutes or so. If not, simply, wash up, lube up, and examine. And maybe she's not fully dilated. Maybe there's something else going on. But if she's fully dilated and the lamb's not coming, there might be something happening. But more often than not, she just needs a little more time to dilate. So we get anxious about it, I think, a lot of times. So just having an idea of how things are progressing along is helpful. When you need assistance from someone, whether it's a veterinarian or an experienced shepherd, that's more a malpresentation issue. A large lambs coming with their head back, or multiple lambs coming at the same time. Those are the 3 that are if you're a new shepherd, until you've seen those can be a challenge to deal with. And you don't see many of them, but it can happen.
So in the event of a prolapse, Tom, what would you do? How do you identify that? And what do you have on hand to deal with it?
Well, in terms of a vaginal prolapse is what we rarely ever see a full uterine prolapse. But vaginal prolapses, there's probably a genetic component and clearly a management component, and we do our best to minimize that. But as much as you can do, sometimes you do have to deal with a vaginal prolapse, and the vulva is just inverting basically, and the inner tissues are showing. So you'll see a bulge with bright pink inside of it, and when the ewe gets up, it'll sometimes go back in on its own, and we don't worry too much about those, although we do isolate that ewe, put her on restricted hay, no hay, but less hay, And that usually buys us 3 or 4 days, and sometimes that's all it takes. And then you will have triplets, 3 days later, and that's why she was bulging so much. But there are cases where, a week or two in advance of her due date, and she's bulging already, and we get worried about her really having trouble. We use what's called the prolapse harness, and you can make these out of baling twine. I had never done that, but you could do that. This is a commercially available one. This basically goes around her neck right here, and this goes down her back, and then in a katahdin we have to put her tail through here, and leave an opportunity for her to defecate through that hole there, and these get quite messy, I will say. This goes under her leg and buckles into that there. The other one goes under her other leg, so her udder would be in between, and it would be on her pretty much like that. The key with these is it can't be loose. These have to be tight, probably uncomfortably tight. And when you release her from this, they will typically run like they've been attacked by something because they have this thing squeezing them all around. So the pressure of this harness being against her vulva will keep all those soft tissues inside. If it doesn't, I don't like to use this. This is called a U-spoon, and this spoon actually goes inside the vagina and holds it in its proper normal position. So that would be like so, and then around, and then this would be tied off to the harness itself on this side and then on this side. A U can lamb with a spoon on, and a U can lamb with a harness on, but I wouldn't count on it. It does happen. I've had ewes have a spoon in and a harness on, and come in, there's a head right here, a head right beside everything. So it's quickly unbuckle, and get it out. And so once I put a harness on, I feel obligated to keep a really close eye on things. And like I said, I've only used a spoon a couple of times in 18 years, and those were special circumstances. But the harness, we have a lot of triplets here, so there's a lot of pressure going on inside of some of those ewes, and you never know. We try and keep a close eye on it. But that's a vaginal prolapse harness, and we have one available, and everyone should have one in case of that. So.
And again, if at any point you don't feel comfortable or you just don't know what to do, call a veterinarian. If there's no response, if it's a Sunday, try to find a farming mentor. Maybe it's the breeder where you got your sheep from, and try to get some help that way. Tom, when a lamb is on the ground, how soon should they be suckling, and what are the signs of a healthy lamb that has hit the ground?
Well, after we strip the teats on winterborn lambs, we strip the teats, get that wax plug out of there, so we know that milk's flowing. We make sure the ewe has milk available on both sides. That's a must. And then a lot of times the lambs will just be up and nursing anyway. But if we do have to give a lamb a little boost, we can help them find the teat. But really, the lamb should be receiving some colostrum within the first hour. If not, some other steps should be taken. And when I say colostrum, I mean that first milk that's so rich with fats and antibodies and other things. That's what we want that lamb to have in that first hour. The milk itself, the ewe's milk that she's going to produce throughout lactation, really doesn't come in for a day, probably 2 or 3 days even. And so that colostrum is there at first, and then it sort of weakens over time, and then she gets into full lactation, producing milk. But if a lamb is not nursing itself, it's not capable of nursing, it doesn't have a suck reflex, then if a lamb has a suck reflex, it will nurse from a bottle. So you could provide it colostrum in a bottle and do that. But if a lamb is so weak that it can't suck on its own, then we want to do a bit more of an invasive method. And that entails using a feeding tube, and this is a rubber. It's a rubber tube with a very soft end, and it's just inserted in the mouth, down the esophagus, carefully to not get the trachea. So you don't want to get it in the breathing tube. You want to get it into the stomach tube, so it goes directly into the stomach. We get that in place, and then what I do is affix a 50 cc syringe to that, and then I kink the tube, pour the milk, the colostrum into that, and then and then release that, and that will drain over time.
What do you use as a source of colostrum?
So we prefer to use the colostrum directly from that lamb's mother. That's always our priority, and that requires actually milking colostrum into a cup. I prefer a coffee cup because it has a nice handle on it, and I can actually heat that coffee cup. I'll carry a cup of hot water, really hot water, to the barn, and then just before I milk her, toss the water, and I got a nice hot cup, and keeping that colostrum warm. Colostrum has so much fat in it, it can sometimes, on a cold night, it can be very slow to flow. So I can strip into that, get a couple ounces in there, and then use that. The backup would be colostrum from another ewe, and we do maintain that on hand. If we have a ewe that has a single lamb, we'll typically strip out one side of her colostrum and use that for other lambs, or if a ewe loses her lambs, just take that colostrum. And then sort of plan C would be to use a commercially available powdered colostrum. And we've done that before, but I generally have a fair amount of frozen colostrum on hand. As long as it's frozen and you don't put it in a microwave to thaw, you just sort of thaw it slowly, colostrum is good the following year.
You know, say we walk into the barn and we find lambs already on the ground. How do we know if they have suckled already or not?
Well, that's a good question to ask, because if you go in at 3 o'clock in the morning and you haven't been there since 11, and there's a set of triplets on the ground, I would first check to see if the mother's teats have been open. So if they are, and the teats are soft and supple and clean, one of those lambs has nursed, but you don't know which one. Get them in a jug, and there's some cues that they give you. When a lamb is well fed, it stretches. When it gets up, it stretches out its back and its front legs in a big stretch. We'd like to see a big stretch. Sometimes if a lamb we haven't seen it standing in a while, we'll actually make it stand up to see if it will stretch. Some people can evaluate the belly by just putting your hands down around the abdomen of the lamb and seeing it feels like it has a little full belly. I'm not convinced that I'm very good at that. I like the stretch technique better. I would say if the temperature is cold and the lamb's mouth is cold, that's always a bad sign. If the mouth is cold, that lamb's borderline hypothermic. It probably gets hypothermic from having inadequate energy and a cold temperature, so that's always a sign that we need to intervene, say, and tube that lamb, because they're burning a tremendous amount of calories just trying to exist at this temperature.
This video covered some of the essentials to keep on hand during the lambing and kidding season. I'll go through them again here and add in a few other things that we did not mention. So first is the options for weighing. A digital fish scale and a tote bag, or another way to hang the lamb, is a great way to get a birth weight and track that lamb's growth progress over time. A container or a bucket to carry all the loose items that you will have. Iodine for navel dipping. Lube for vaginal probing and assisting with any malpositioned lambs. A vitamin E supplement is also great to have. Often these do contain selenium, so like a selenium and vitamin E paste. A digital thermometer. A record book for lambing. And if you're lambing or kidding in the winter, having a way to keep the newborn lambs warm is a good idea. Use extreme caution with heat lamps. And something that works great is wool or fleece sweaters cut from the sleeves of thrift store sweaters or blankets. A tool for pulling. These are commercially available. And again, if you're not comfortable with this, call your vet. A prolapse harness and U-spoon. Colostrum from a milked ewe, which can be frozen. Or you can get this commercially at any feed store, and this is usually in a powdered form. Gloves and hand sanitizer. And a tube for tube feeding. As the saying goes, it's better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it. And that certainly applies to our lambing and vet kits. This is how we build them over time with firsthand experience. We hope this video has been helpful to you. Happy lambing!